Hello, security pros. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on today's ESA webinar. Uh, Generate RMR and meet requirements using multi-carrier products. This webinar will focus on the latest technology and cellular solutions for the industry, multi-carrier technology. During this webinar, attendees will get a better understanding of cellular as a superior communication pathway to POTS and learn more about Telguard's latest innovation that allows systems to use all major networks in the US. By the end of the presentation, viewers will have a thorough understanding of not just the technology, but also how it compares to the alternatives and how to sell it in order to increase RMR on existing and new systems. My name's Ana Magayon. I'm a Marcom specialist for ESA, and I'm excited to lead this webinar today. Before we dive in, I'd like to provide some tips for those of you joining us on your first ESA webinar. Welcome. You will be muted for the duration of this session, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. If a question or comment comes to mind at any point during today's session, click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and I'll ensure we save some time for your questions with our experts today. We will also be recording this webinar, so you can rewatch the on-demand session and share it with your colleagues. Tomorrow, you'll receive an email thanking you for your attendance today with a link to the recording. Additionally, don't miss out on the opportunity to join us at ESX 2025, taking place on June 16th to 19th in Cobb County, Georgia, home of the Atlanta Braves. ESX is the premier event for electronic security and life safety professionals. With engaging sessions, valuable networking opportunities, and cutting-edge technology exhibits, ESX promises to be an unforgettable experience. We at ESA realize your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of that time with us today. So, without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to our professionals. We have Brian Dotson, the Senior Sales Manager at Telguard, and Daniel Rosales, Director of Technical Service. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Anna. Appreciate y'all so much, and the rest of the ESA team. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today as we dive into a couple of our new solutions that will hopefully be beneficial to your side. So I've been with Telguard for 16 years now. Daniel, I believe, has been with them 17. And for both of us, we've shared a lot of firsts with the company. We've kind of marked some of those on the slide that you see currently. But just jumping to 2024, what's got us super excited this year and late last year was that we launched the very first commercial fire multi-carrier communicator, a product that uses the top 3 carriers in the market today. And then early 2025, we launched kind of the sister product to that first solution that incorporates not only the multi-carrier aspect, but a dual path IP side as well. And you know, these pictures down at the bottom right of the deck kind of lead you through the evolution of Telguard. Now, I've only seen kind of part of these units, so we've really come a long way from what they used to look like. So NFPA 72 code, hopefully everyone's somewhat familiar with this if you've joined us today. So there's 2 pieces of the code. The more recent piece that defines the sole path category for communication options. So currently Telguard products today on the commercial fire side can accomplish 2 aspects of that code. More recent and what's probably widely used today is the 60-minute supervision that was applied during the 2013 and more recent versions of the code. And then the 5-minute supervision, which was really the very first introduction of sole path to the NFPA code. So beyond that, if you're using commercial fire product in a dual path application, so 2 forms of communication, and incorporating, say, a Telguard device using cellular as one of those communication paths, the other side, per current code, would require a 6-hour testing path. Our product does have this capability, but to be perfectly frank, we're not seeing that widely utilized, widely enforced from local AHJs. So we saw what was coming down the code, we incorporated it into our product line, and it's there, should that requirement ever come to be. Really what's accepted more so on the dual path side is daily testing. So 24-hour testing, which of course our products can do. And the secondary communication path, whether that's an IP or an alternative cellular solution or some other technology, assuming that should have daily testing ability as well. So UL tests and lists products to a couple different things. Of course, UL 864 is the big one. That's what they're looking at. And Telguard products have the CSFM, California State Fire Marshal listing, for these multi-carrier solutions, as well as our single carrier solutions. And then also FDNY, should that be a requirement in your area. So the Telguard system, let's just kind of get to know the ecosystem as it looks today. On the left-hand side, you have your product installed to the customer's fire panel, intrusion panel, et cetera. Those products, the Telguard product line, communicate over the cellular networks, AT&T or Verizon traditionally. But as I mentioned, with the multi-carrier product, we've now incorporated T-Mobile into the mix. So depending on what path the product has chosen, it'll go over that particular network back to our Telguard Communication Center in Atlanta. And then from there, we are really pushing for a lot more IP delivery to monitoring stations. It's a cleaner path. The technology is kept more up to date and typically is a little bit faster than communicating signals from our side over to monitoring station via traditional phone line. Usually you can save about 15 seconds from what I understand. So on the install site itself, Telguard is hooked up to the alarm panel. What makes us so unique? We're virtually universal. We understand 13 different alarm formats that I'll get to a little bit later. From the panel to the Telguard, once we receive the signals from that side, we're going to communicate either over cellular pathway that I mentioned before or internet, depending on the model of Telguard that you've selected. It could use either or path. Once our TCC gets the signals, we're going to deliver those to a central station, either through IP delivery. Now that's going to be specific to Contact ID, SIA, or DMP formats currently. If you still have to utilize a POTS receiver, a phone line receiver number to your monitoring station, that's where the other formats that we understand will come into play. So things like 4.2, Pulse, Sonatrol, Radionics will be utilized there. So the product line kind of prior to the multi-carrier release would look like this, and still does. We still are selling what I'm referring to as our single carrier solutions. The TG7FP comes in either an AT&T or Verizon specific option. But these units, what we intended the TG7FP to be used for was more economical applications, where our customers are having to be very competitive with the bidding process. So we figured out a way to trim the fat of our fire product and get it down into a smaller enclosure, a different material enclosure. This is a heat-resistant resin enclosure. Now, since we stripped back things like the transformer and additional accessories, this particular unit can only be powered from the fire panel itself, DC power. That's 12 or 24 volts. And along with that, it's only going to be used for sole path applications. It's not going to have an additional jack to incorporate, say, an on-site phone line or an on-site Ethernet connection. Sliding over to our right, TG7FS can be used as sole path, but actually this unit can back up or be in front of an existing phone line on the premise. It ships with the transformer, has space inside the can for a battery, should you want to power it separately from your fire panel. Or if all the calculations make sense, you can actually just wire it directly to the fire panel for that DC connection, making it an easier installation, typically for everybody. The TG-PIM, I'll kind of get into more detail at the end of this particular slide, but the TG7FS is compatible with that, as well as the TG7FE. That's also going to be able to utilize the TG-PIM should that be a necessity. So TG7FE, sole path like the other units, but in its case, it can be dual path incorporating local internet, Ethernet connection from the user's site. Same sort of power setup as the TG7FS. Now on the TG-PIM, The reason we came out with this particular product was for those panels, those fire panels that don't have a traditional dialer or DAC connection. So, I know in some customers' cases and integrators' cases, they want to try to get the customer on a newer system. The pushback from the customer is going to be, well, it worked fine before on, say, a phone line. I don't really want to invest that kind of money in a whole new system. It doesn't seem broke. So our customers can take one of these metal can products that we sell, TG7FS, TG7FE, add on the TG PIM, and as long as they can power directly from that fire system, 12 or 24 volts, we can now customize 8 additional inputs on the TG PIM. So should that panel not have a dialer or DACT again, or be producing a format that we may not understand, the TG PIM really comes in handy in allowing the customer to keep what they've got and allowing our customer, the integrator, to add additional RMR through the utilization of these cellular products. So the superstars of the moment are multi-carrier products, come in 2 flavors. TG7FM, similar to the TG7FP, it's sole path. It only powers from the fire panel, 12 or 24 volts. And again, we're not shipping it with the traditional accessories that would come with the metal can version of our solution. So, not getting into specifics, the takeaway there is that it's just going to be a lower costing product compared to our metal can solutions. So on the other side, the TG7FEM, again, can be used as sole path with the multi-carrier technology. But in its case, it can incorporate on-site customer internet. So dual path, should it be necessary or required. Same sort of power setup as the other metal can products, power from the panel, or utilize the included transformer and space inside the can for the backup battery. If the PIM, TG PIM, is going to be needed for this particular install, again, all of our metal can products, like the TG7FM, can incorporate that TG PIM accessory. So multi-carrier, incorporating AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon into the mix. It's our latest development that we're super excited about, as if you can't tell by my voice and cadence. Again, being with Telguard for 16 years, I've seen so many things, but I feel like this has been our greatest release to date. It's just so unique. We're the only ones, only manufacturers in the commercial fire space that have this sort of capability at the moment. And so we really want to talk about it. We really want to get excited about it and hope that our customers are just as excited about it as we are. So again, we've always had relationships with AT&T, and then we incorporated Verizon, and now our latest carrier relationship is, of course, T-Mobile. These are the biggest 3 cellular networks in the U.S. today. And all this is going to do is allow our devices that incorporate multi-carrier is provide our dealers with a single device combining the power of all 3 carriers, and that it allows for this triple carrier redundancy, something that they're just not going to find elsewhere in the market today. The ecosystem for these multi-carrier products, very similar to the first one I showed you. Alarm panel, our communicator hooked up to it, capturing signals from that fire panel, passing it over one of the 3 networks, depending on which one it's currently utilizing, back to our Telguard Communication Center in Atlanta, passing back to the central station, and then, of course, monitoring station, calling emergency services as needed. So what's really unique to our approach to the multi-carrier solutions is the carrier selection process, short-term CSP. It is a patent pending innovation for cellular technology that allows our multi-carrier units to analyze the performance of all 3 carriers upon initial power up and rank those carriers, strongest, second strongest, third strongest, in order to start the installer and customer off on the best foot possible. So should one of those carriers, maybe have an issue along the way, it's going to drop down to the second best or the third best. So we feel like this is a pretty innovative approach. all of our relationships to the three carriers I mentioned are direct. Now, I may come across as a subject matter expert. I like to think I am, but I just don't know everything. So I'd like to pull Daniel in on this particular sub point. Daniel, could you get into a little more detail on what no MVNO means?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. So, in conceptualizing the multi-carrier, right, we know what we wanted. We wanted to give the best possible coverage for a cellular communicator. We wanted to give the best possible chance of maintaining a connection alive and present at all times. And the only way to really maximize coverage is by pulling together, overlapping the coverage of all three major carriers, so that if you are in an area that has low coverage, at least one of those carriers is going to give you something. And if one of those three carriers doesn't give you anything, well, then that's just not a good situation for a cellular to be the communication pathway. So, right off the bat, if it doesn't work with a Telguard multi-carrier unit, your best bet is to simply not offer cellular service as an option. It's just what it is. Now, when it came to figuring out how to do it, right? There were a couple of different ways of kind of making it work, right? One of the ways is really just to have a second physical SIM and kind of let the radio, run on one SIM. And if it fails, for some reason something goes wrong, it takes over and chooses the other SIM, or give you an option to choose. Hey, you know what the two carriers are, and choose one or choose the other is your choice. So we could have gone about it that way. What we wanted to do really was, number one, have access to as many carriers as possible. So we didn't want to physically limit ourselves to two physical SIMs or three physical SIMs, or who knows what the landscape of cellular connectivity is going to be 5 years from now, right? We could have a fifth, fourth, sixth major player coming into the picture, or the players may change from T-Mobile and an acquisition and something else coming into the picture. All these guys are their businesses, right? Looking to get a piece of that pie. So the landscape may change, and we don't want to see ourselves in a situation in which we have to have five different SIM cards from five different carriers and figuring out a way of making it work. So we knew that what we wanted to do was have a way that we can host as many carriers as possible, but at the same time, we wanted to maintain our independence, right? Our connections to AT&T, our connections to Verizon needed to remain as they are today. Basically, virtual private networks that connect us to them, nobody else in between. We needed to make sure there was no middleman in the picture that would prevent us from reaching out to these carriers when an issue arises. When we were looking at how to do it, MVNOs came into the picture. MVNOs reached out to us and say, "Hey, you want more than one carrier? We can give you more than one carrier through our network." Now, what's an MVNO? Let's start with an MNO, mobile network operator. That's your AT&T, that's your Verizon, that's your T-Mobile. It's what your US Cellular was before it got acquired by T-Mobile. It's just basically your carrier. An MVNO, you add the V in there, stands for virtual. It's a mobile virtual network operator. And it basically means a company that doesn't necessarily own the towers, right? But it virtually provides you that access to these carriers. So we could have very much done this years ago with an MVNO and basically said, hey, we're going to go with MVNO X that's going to give us access to AT&T and Verizon under a single SIM. The reason why we didn't want to go that route is because control of the carrier would have been up to that service provider, right? So in that case, if we were to go that way, we would have basically allowed the business to determine what carrier works for you as an integrator. That is not the way we wanted to do it. What we wanted to do was to allow the device on premise, wherever you're installing it, to determine what is best for it. We didn't want you to just have to choose AT&T or Verizon as your first carrier, and then you have the redundancy of having other carriers. We didn't want you to have a specific carrier as your primary every time you power it up. And that's where the CSP that Brian was mentioning comes into the picture, because we were able to have those contractual independent connections to each carrier. We're basically letting the device judge, assess, and determine what's best. At the end of the day, right, we're still having live connections to all three networks. So the carriers are essentially getting paid from us, but we're letting the device make the call on what to use, and going about it the way that we did by essentially having independent profiles inside of our eSIM is a way that we can get that independence from the networks and at the same time have scalability. So once again, because we're not tied to a physical SIM, right? If tomorrow there's a big shift in the industry and there is a fourth carrier that comes into the picture, we can simply continue to manufacture the radios that we manufacture today, but we can have contractual agreements to bring the new carrier into the picture, add it to a SIM profile, and instead of multi-carrier with 3 carriers, you would have tomorrow multi-carrier with 4 carriers now in the picture. So it allows us to grow and continue to grow as the technology evolves. So hopefully I didn't bore everybody to sleep. So I'll hand it over, Brian, all yours now.
Thanks, Daniel. You took the words right out of my mouth. But no, what I'm getting from that is, and I think you said it too, single radio, single SIM that is extremely scalable. And that's great. That's a great option to have at the end of the day. Very beneficial to the groups that we work with. And as Daniel mentioned, the carrier selection based on the sample performance, it's going to lock into the best, rank them, and then apply them as needed along the way. So automatic failover, we're obviously familiar that, there's others in the market having dual SIM products for the commercial fire world. And, how we wanted to approach this was that should the primary carrier, have an issue, we didn't want our customers to have to do anything, to have to make a move, to have to adjust something on a website, to actually be on site with the product. So with that being said, we just wanted everything to be automatic. Should the primary one have an issue, it'll automatically fall over to the secondary or the third one as needed, ensuring just a smooth, seamless installation and communication path for our customer and our customer's customer. So why add T-Mobile? I think that might be a question people ask. You have AT&T, you have Verizon. Those seem to be the big two that may be all you need at the end of the day, but not really the case. I mean, as we explored the relationship with T-Mobile a little bit deeper, of course, 3 is obviously better than 2. But, T-Mobile has had a lot of domestic expansions. They've acquired Sprint and then more recently, US Cellular in the Midwest. So, their coverage as a carrier, cellular carrier, has just grown leaps and bounds over the past several years. And they've really invested in that 5G footprint, which we all know, working with any sort of cellular product, we will eventually get to at some point in the future. Everything right now is still on LTE and will be on LTE for, some time to come. But inevitably, at some point, our customers will have to potentially upgrade another type of product that they have installed to a customer's fire panel. We want to offer a solution for the commercial fire world that gives them the ability to not really be as concerned with that. And that's where our usage of LTE-M technology comes into play. Currently using LTE, but LTE-M will fall over or carry over to the 5G footprint. Now, obviously, if T-Mobile has expanded on this footprint, we're going to be really sitting pretty, about when that time comes. So installation and activation, all we're really talking about is 4 steps here. Registration accomplished via our Telguard.com portal that dealers can log into. 6-step process that we'll kind of take a little bit of a look at in a bit. And then also our mobile app, Telguard Tools, using the same login credentials as our Telguard.com site. Just a quick note on Telguard Tools. I don't feel like it gets enough spotlight as it should. So, working with Daniel for so many years and hearing him do these presentations, I wholeheartedly agree. While it's a good registration tool, it's an even better troubleshooting tool. So it gives our customers the ability to quickly look up accounts, do QR scans, pull up an account, get a status immediately in an easy to read interface on their mobile phone or app. and then, kind of troubleshoot, know what they're getting themselves into, at that point, rather than pulling out a laptop, logging in, or, having to reach out to our tech support team. Now, should they need to reach out to our team, we're available Monday through Saturday to assist our customers, in troubleshooting devices and digging deeper, into things they might be running into locally in the field. But just having that ability to get a quick hit on, your installation, I think is very beneficial to all of our installers. Installation. So after we've registered, now we're going to move on to the physical installation of the device. And of course, it just depends on which of our devices you're working with. If it's the TG7FP or new Multicarrier TG7FM, based on the graphic you see in front of you, pretty simple installation. Cable connection between the jacks for communication purposes. And then, as I mentioned before, powering directly from the fire panel through the second cable connection. That's it. You're kind of done. If we're talking about the TG7FS, powering straight from the alarm panel, boom, not much really to go into there. Pretty simple installation. TG7FS powering from a transformer and backup battery, going that way. It doesn't really change much. So I think you kind of see what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to give our customers options, at the end of the day. One installation might not be right for everybody. So we want to be flexible in the solutions that we're selling so that our customers can do what's best for them. If they want to go left or go right. TG7FE or TG7FEM, the big thing that changes compared to our other solutions is pulling in the customer's local internet, through the router. So we have a secondary jack on our unit for that. And then, as I mentioned, kind of in the product overview slides, our TG PIM for those situations where the panel doesn't have a DAC, doesn't have a dialer, or doesn't do a format, do one of the 13 formats that we understand. That's where the TG PIM would come into play. And again, just as a reminder, you would need to power that PIM from the fire panel in order for it to function in the way that we need it to function with our communicator. So third step, activation, one signal. Once everything's wired up and registered, we just need one signal from that fire panel to process over to our Telguard communicator and then communicate back to our Telguard communication center. Beyond that, the customer is going to use, their local resources, either calling the monitoring station directly or a potential mobile app set up to confirm they have received their test signals. So that's really all it boils down to. Now, going back to the carrier selection process, after you power up the radio, it's going to take about 5 minutes for that process to complete. And once it does, as you see on the screenshot there in the bottom of the page, it'll produce results showing how the unit locally ranks those carriers, Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T. We're showing signal strength out of 4, and we're also showing dBm, depending on how you want to read everything. And there's just a more zoomed in version for those like me that need glasses. Now, Daniel also, letting the cat out of the bag here a little bit, handles our marketing team. And him and the team put together this really good material that is meant for end users specifically. While you can print this out locally, I'm more than happy to send it to you in addition to the rest of our sales group. We can also brand it. So if you notice on the left image bottom, we have space for logo of our customers, dealer name, contact information, and a QR code, if that's where you're at with the company. So we can really customize this a little bit more so it's coming across as a local fire alarm panel integrators, product solution to an end user rather than just a Telguard product. So we've reached the finish line, and if there's one slide and all of the stuff that I went over today to take away, it's this one. One model per truck, streamlined for efficient installs. Redundancy, triple redundancy from the top 3 US cellular providers. we have a solution where you can incorporate IP as a secondary path with the TG7FEM. 13 different alarm formats. I might as well go ahead and rattle them off. I thought there was a slide that went into that. My mistake. So Contact ID, SIA, DMP, Sonatrol, 3 different kinds of 4x2 format, 3 different kinds of 3x1 format, modem 2E, 3A squared, modem 4. So if you have a solution out in the field, regardless of age, however old it is, if it does one of those formats, we're compatible with that in terms of upgrading that system from, say, a phone line to a wireless cellular communication pathway. If you are running into a panel that doesn't do one of those formats, or again, doesn't have a dialer or DACT, that you incorporate the TG PIM into one of our metal can solutions, because those metal cans obviously have more space inside the can to work with and allow for that TG PIM to be installed, mounted, connected. Our TCC, Telguard Communication Center, again, that feature, not only does it provide kind of the ability to communicate signals from the product out to the monitoring station, but what maybe some of the integrators don't realize is we can actually override what's in an existing panel. So even if you're not familiar with that panel's brand, that programming, you're locked out, you don't have an admin code, you can't get in there. Our TCC feature in the registration process allows you, the customer, the integrator, to tell us where to direct the signals to at the end of the day, regardless of what's programmed in the panel in those account receiver number fields. You give us the information, we will direct it to the right path and put it in the hands of the right monitoring station to make the correct decision. So the last thing I want to leave everybody with is, obviously POTS sunset has been a topic of conversation over the past several years, and it's only getting worse. So if you haven't already thought about upgrading your existing phone line connected customers, I would say now's the time to absolutely get together a game plan, a strategy, and how you want to get those customers over to an alternative communication product, specifically a Telguard, especially since we have the multi-carrier solutions now. It's going to take a lot of headache doing that now, instead of waiting until it's right at the point of the telco companies not supporting phone lines anymore, or they're causing communication issues, down the line all the way to monitoring. I would say, get together with your teams, reach out to the Telguard sales group. We're happy to kind of dig into that further and, try to figure out a good strategy, and working with, not only us, but with our monitoring partners and distribution partners to try to figure out what's the best game plan for our customers. And with that, I think we've reached the point of Q&A, Anna.
Perfect. Sounds great. All right, let me take a look at some of the questions that we've had submitted here. Our first question is, you said the TCC is in Atlanta. Is there more than just one TCC, and where would they be located?
The TCC is located in Atlanta, Georgia. I apologize. I hear a phone ringing and I don't want to get off my screen just to kill it. So it will go away in a second. So yes, the TCC is based in Atlanta. We work with our partner there. Daniel, is there anything, I don't want to get into too much detail or, show how the sausage is made. Is there anything you kind of want to touch on in regards to the TCC?
It's without getting into too many details, a SOC 2 facility. It's under Evoke management. It's basically where big guys like AT&T have their web farms and their server farms. It has multiple redundancies that are part of the data center itself. But yeah, that's basically where it resides. It's Lithia Springs technically, which is I guess you consider it part of Atlanta Metro, right? Technically in the area.
Mm-hmm. So I think that would answer that particular question, Anna.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is, who is the MVNO? Are they an entity that is established and stable? And what other industries use MVNO?
Daniel?
MVNO is really a term, so we don't use we stay away from MVNO. Like I mentioned, a virtual network operator. It's like an aggregator that resells carrier services, right? So they add value to it by giving you a, whether it be like a UI that lets you manage everything seamlessly, or give you other ways of finding efficiencies by having one company uh, um, handling all the different connections to the carriers, right? There are several companies out there that are doing it. There's a lot of them that do it for the automotive industry. Um, but when we think about the industry that we cater to, security and life safety, right, it's very different in nature, right? If you, for some reason, you can't start your car from the inside of your house on a chilly winter morning, it's an inconvenience, but it's not really going to cause a loss of a life or loss of property, right? So we want to be very careful when it comes to that type of situation. But yeah, MVNO is just a term that can be used for anybody really reselling cellular services.
Right. So the takeaway would be we don't use one. So yeah, we don't have a name for any particular one in general since we don't use it.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
The next question, how expensive is it for using 3 carriers? Do you have to pay for each individual carrier?
Yeah. So I'm more than happy to get into pricing specifics, off webinar. You see my contact information in front of you. Even if you're not based in the West Coast, you can use me as a point of reference, point person, just to have that initial conversation with. But in general, it's basically $1 more for SoulPath to have access to 3 carriers compared to our traditional 60-minute SoulPath rate using a single carrier. So $1 more. If we're talking dual path, then that'd be like $2 more compared to the same rate using our single carrier product.
Lovely. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Is this considered sole or dual path when it comes to NFPA?
Yeah, so it depends on the model. With the TG7FP, based on us turning on the 60-minute link supervision feature for that primary engaged cellular pathway, it would be considered a sole path product. Because at the end of the day, even though all 3 carriers are active, we're only supervising one carrier at a time, whatever is considered that primary carrier. So that would be the TG7FM would be considered sole path. The TG7FEM, since it's got the ability to incorporate Ethernet with the customer's local internet, if both technologies are in play, multi-carrier cellular plus the IP, polling at a daily test or 6-hour test, again, whatever is required by the local AHJ, that would be considered a dual path solution. So it's the code is always, or NFPA is always looking at, the testing frequency of these pathways, these technologies, and that's what the AHJs will look to test on site, with each product. So yeah, just depends on the model.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. Looks like we have one more question. How long before the TG7FM, 7FEM will be affected by a cellular sunset?
Oh, good one. Yeah. So I think I kind of touched on it earlier in the webinar. Telguard transitioned to LTE-M on their commercial product. And of course, this webinar, we're talking specifically commercial fire. So all of our products utilize on the commercial fire side, LTE-M. And even though that technology is 5G ready, right now in 2025, a majority of the networks in play from the carriers are LTE. They're using LTE footprint. They may be preparing to, jump into 5G at some point down the road, but right now it is all LTE. And so that is what that LTE-M technology is utilizing at the moment. Now, and Daniel, I don't know if you want to mention, what's the current, do we have a rough time frame of that transition from LTE to 5G? I want to say I heard 2035. Is that still the case?
So just to be 100% transparent, not even the carriers are committing to when the sunset is going to happen, because it's more of a technological sunset, right? If you have a phone, iPhone, Android, whatever your brand is, you're used to seeing the 5G little logo up at the top right or top left of your phone, kind of letting you know what kind of what kind of service you have. When you first power up your phone, it usually goes to LTE first before getting on 5G. If you're taking a road trip, right, and you actually pay attention to your phone, there is 0 point something 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 percent chance that if you drive down more than a couple of hours, that you're actually going to stay on a 5G network the whole time. It just doesn't happen. And the reason for it is that in order to get those high speeds that 5G promises to deliver, and that we're used to getting inside of the metro areas, inside of the city, um, the towers need to use high frequencies, like in the gigs, like 6 gig frequencies. I know this may be getting a little bit over technical, but in essence, the higher the frequency, the higher the data that you can actually transact with, but also the lower or the smaller the coverage. So in order for you to have a good 5G coverage, you have to have more towers or more transmitters out there. AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, all the different carriers, they will need to have more and more transmitters out there. And that's the reason why when you take road trips or you get outside of the metro areas, you are going to find, gaps where it goes from 5G to LTE and then again back to 5G. And until the networks can become stable enough to have 5G coverage throughout the US, LTE is not going to go away. So right now, 2035, 2040 is looking like that would be sort of a target time frame for the carriers to I don't want to say get their act together, but kind of figure it out how to offer 5G service throughout the country. But even then, like Brian mentioned, we're using LTE-M technology, right? And LTE-M technology was essentially designed with systems like ours in mind, connected cities like parking meters, traffic lights. They need some kind of cellular connection. Cars that use cellular, they don't use much data. They use a little bit of data, but they need to have reliable connections. They need to be able to get out there and get signal from wherever they are. They need to have low power consumption. There are a very specific set of requirements that went into creating that LTE-M network. One of those requirements was longevity, right? If you think of a parking meter, or if you think of a car, even you buy a car, right? Yeah, it takes you about 5 or 6 years to pay it off. And if you're like me, you want to hold on to your car for about 10 years at least to really get your money's worth, right? Get into that sweet spot when you don't have payments and you're just riding it with no issues. Well, if you are a consumer of a regular cell phone, you're going to change your phone every couple of years. Why? Because they practically give them away for free. When it comes to a car, you don't think of it having a cellular device. You don't think of it having a cellular component that you will need to change every couple of years to keep up with whatever's going on with the network changes, right? So CAT-M was essentially designed for those type of systems where longevity is key. You don't want to touch it. You just want to let it run and let it work for as long as it can. So when the sunset does happen, 2035, 37, 40, whenever it actually does happen, um, the the guidelines for CAT-M basically state that if you're a carrier that is supporting LTE-M technology, category M technology, right, you need to carve out a portion of your 5G network to support LTE-M devices. And that is where when Brian mentioned T-Mobile and why we chose T-Mobile and all the moves they made to increase their 5G coverage, that's why that is important to us. Because when the time comes that the sunset comes around, these LTE-M radios are meant to survive and move on past the LTE sunset to use that 5G connection that, because of the protocols of LTM, the networks are going to support. Hopefully I didn't lose you guys there, but that's kind of a explanation. I'm sorry. I could talk way too much than I need to.
No, that was great, Daniel. I think you kind of put it all together really well. And from my side, basically just to kind of wrap that question up, being with Telguard for 16 years, having went through 3 different cellular sunsets, I feel like with each sunset and each integration of this newer cellular technology, 3G, LTE, LTEM, I've seen the life of each product expand a lot farther out. And, everything you just said, Daniel, my takeaway would be that by putting in an LTEM unit, I am probably going to get the greatest life of any cellular product that Telguard or potentially anybody else has ever released.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. I don't believe we have any more questions, so we will be releasing the on-demand recording of this webinar tomorrow. And in the meantime, have a wonderful day. Thank you guys so much.